Okay, well, I have 201, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Oh, perfect. You have it recording. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar this afternoon around response to intervention. You've got about 3 educators from across Arkansas who will be presenting to you this afternoon. So thank y'all so much for your willingness to given your time to prepare the presentation and also to present to other educators around the state. I'm Missy Wally and I'm with the Department of Ed, and I get the pleasure of working with several of you across the state. So thank you for all of the hard work that you put in. And also we have hiding on this webinar is Stephen Walker. So thank you, Stephen from Team Digital, for recording this for us and opening it up. And this recording will be available under the webinar links on the PLC page on the DESE website. So if you go, and we do have a new website, but if you'll go on the DESE website and on the right-hand side, you'll see topics A to Z, and you can click on P for Professional Learning Communities in Arkansas. And you will see a whole list of webinars that you may choose from. And wherever you are in that journey, you can choose from one of those webinars to help with that area, or you can reach out to these administrators. And I think their contact information is on the last slide. Am I right in saying that?
Yes.
So you can reach out to one of these administrators, and I know that they will be more than willing to help you. So if you have questions throughout the presentation, if it's some part where they will stop and answer those questions. If not, I have asked them to stay on a little bit later after the presentation to address any questions that you have. So if you will roll us to the next slide, and also you can ask those questions in the Q&A, and we'll be addressing those as we go. These 3 that we have today are part of our statewide guiding coalition. And just to revisit, just because we want to make sure that we're headed in the right direction, just to revisit our mission and vision, we started with unfinished learning when we formed our guiding coalition last summer, but we have changed our mission to we are providing support and guidance for Arkansas educators in developing, leading, and sustaining a statewide professional learning community. We are working on becoming a high-functioning collaborative team that plays an integral part in Arkansas, leading the nation in student-focused education. So our goals, and you'll see that this first one, for our first goal, and this webinar addresses one of our goals, is implementing and spreading professional learning communities throughout the schools and districts in Arkansas. And we do that with webinars and then presenting at the conferences and sharing our journey. But I also want you to know too, these schools have also graciously opened their doors. So if you want to visit one of these schools, if you'll go onto that same page on the PLC website, there is a Google form that you can fill out. And just specifically, wherever you are in the journey, if it's something that you want to learn how to set your mission and vision, state that and they'll make sure that you understand that. Or if it's something where you want to learn how you've hit the point in your journey where you're frustrated with determining essential standards, or if you've hit the point in your journey where you're struggling with RTI, we've got 3 professionals right here who can help you. So just fill out that information and we can set up observations for you to get into those schools and take your teams and observe that. Also building collaborative teacher and administrator teams. And I want to just put this little plug in there because we've started this as of last week on the same page. You can get lots of information off that same page. On the same page of that PLC page, you will see a link that says Project Collaboration. And that link, if you'll click on that link, you've got collaborative teacher teams across the state that meet once a month. So if you have a teacher team who's at the point where they are struggling with writing common formative assessments, they can set up a time. Let's say it's a 3rd grade team. They can set up a time to meet with another 3rd grade team somewhere in the state, and they can talk about common formative assessments. Or if you have a singleton on your campus, let's say I have a CTE teacher who's the only Agri teacher, and they want to meet with other Agri teachers across the state, they can also click on that collaborative project collaboration and find the time that they're meeting and be able to join a collaborative teacher team group across the state. So that's meeting our number 2 goal, supporting and developing professional learning communities. They're modeling and observations, and I've already talked about that. And then you can partner model PLC schools with other schools. And then we celebrate statewide PLC successes. And let me just say, right now we are sitting with 12 schools in the state who are nationally recognized as model PLC schools. That is incredible. And I will say that 10 of those schools were identified within the last year. So we are moving. So congratulations, Arkansas. And then to the next slide, just want to put another little plug in here, just so that you know, I always put this at the beginning of all of our webinars, to know that PLC is something it's not in isolation of the HRS framework, the High Reliability Schools framework. There are 5 levels to the High Reliability Schools framework. You have the safe and supportive, level 1, and a collaborative culture, which is basically your PLC, that collaborative culture. Effective teaching in every classroom, which is the individual teacher and their approach, classroom management, that teachers maintain enhanced levels of pedagogical skills. And then you have level 3, a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And level 4, standards reference reporting, and level 5, competency-based. Today, levels 2 and 3 will be discussed, really levels 1, 2, and 3, because you're going to be doing this in a collaborative situation. You're going to be helping the intervention within an individual classroom, and also as a team, you're meeting the needs of every student to ensure high levels of learning for all students. So I know I'm not the one that you want to hear from, so I've spoken quickly because I want to turn it over to them. So I'm going to turn it over to Jana Wilson first, and then Jana's from Blytheville Primary, and then we also have Shandy Gordon and Jason Seelig. So I will let them introduce themselves when it comes to their turn, but I'm going to turn it over to Jana. Thank y'all.
Hello, everyone. I am Jana Wilson. I'm the principal at Blytheville Primary, and I'm happy to be here with you today. We are going to talk about the overall process of our RTI. We're going to talk about the pyramid, and then each of us has taken a different tier, and we'll talk about tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, and then there'll be time for questions at the end if you have them. So as we go through this, I want you to keep in mind something. As we talk about RTI at work, the RTI at work and the PLC at work process work hand in hand. Your professional learning community creates the culture that allows RTI to take root. And I have the privilege of working with Brian Butler in my school last year to work on RTI. He was our RTI coach. And he told us that in one of our Academy Institute things that we did. And it's really stuck with me ever since, is that becoming a professional learning community sets that culture you need in order to make sure RTI works in your school. So if we look at the pyramid, one thing you're going to notice is that it is inverted. And we're going to watch a short video with Mike Matos, and he's going to explain why is this pyramid inverted, because we usually see it the other way. And then he's going to talk about briefly the parts of the pyramid, and then we'll take that pyramid apart and show you one step at a time what it means. Oops, hold on.
We take a look at your blank pyramid. You notice this pyramid is upside down. It's inverted. If you came to my second breakout on day 1, I talked about this. The reason why you see the pyramid upside down is because in so many schools and districts, we've seen them, when they look at a traditional pyramid, right side up, they view RTI, a system of tiered support, as just a new way to qualify kids for special ed. And usually above tier 3, they put a line and it says special ed up on top. And the whole pyramid seems pointed to special ed. And all the tiers below become just the screening process or the hoops you have to jump through before you can get kids in traditional special ed testing. And that makes your system of interventions just turn into a paperwork process, a screening process where teachers spend more time filling out forms than helping kids. And we wanted to change that thinking because we're not doing tiered support just as a way to screen kids prior to traditional special ed. We're doing tiered support to be proactive, to give every child the support they need. So hopefully we're catching problems early and often so we don't have big discrepancies later where kids need to go into special ed to get the extra help. So to change the thinking, we inverted the pyramid and we said, you know what? Really, a system of interventions is about focusing on the individual needs of kids. And you still have tiers. The top of the pyramid now is tier 1, what all kids get. Tier 2 is supplemental or a little extra help. And tier 3 is intensive or a lot of help. But as you go through the tiers, you're not thinking, are we close to special ed? We're going from what all kids need at your school to learn in high levels, tier 1, to what these kids need for a little extra help to learn at high levels, to by tier 3, you're down to what this kid needs to succeed in our school. So that's why you see the pyramid upside down. That's the thinking. You also see the pyramid as split. There's kind of a green top right-hand corner, then there's this red, weird shape area. This is the thinking. The green area represents the responsibilities at tier 1 and tier 2 that your PLC collaborative teacher team should take the lead on. Let me say it again. That top green corner is where your PLC teacher teams take the lead. So at an elementary school, this is where your kindergarten team takes the lead. Your first grade team takes the lead. Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. Middle schools, high school, this is where your Algebra 1 team takes the lead. This is where your world history team takes the lead. This is where the biology team takes the lead. This is where your fine arts team takes the lead. How you form your teacher teams in this PLC process, they're going to take the lead. And whatever you put in those two boxes, tier 1, tier 2, within that green box. The red side represents your school-wide support system. What do I mean by that? Every school has resources that aren't owned by one grade level. They're not owned by one department. They need to be coordinated to best be used across the school. Like what? Like your special ed support staff, like your school psychologist, your school counselor, your speech and language pathologist, your administration, your instructional aides, your classified staff. Those are all resources that, because one grade level or one department doesn't own them, it's going to take some school-wide effort to coordinate how they should be used. So I will propose to you that that red area should be led by a school leadership team, a guiding coalition. And as Rick said, leadership team doesn't mean admin alone because we know leadership is widely dispersed. This is teacher leaders and administration working together to best coordinate your school-wide resources. Because we have limited resources, we want to use them as effectively as possible. Now, I'll spell more of this out as we move along, but I want to give you the bigger picture.
So, thinking about what Mike Matos just told us about the pyramid, there are 4 outcomes in the RTI work process. The first one is that all students are going to have access to essential grade level curriculum as part of their core instruction. That's your tier 1. Every kid in your school has to have access to that essential grade level skills that those grade level teams have chosen. The second outcome is at the end of every unit of study, some students are going to need additional time and support. So they're going to get that additional time and support they need. It's where your tier 2 processes come in. The third outcome is some students enter each year lacking skills from previous years. So they're lacking some foundational skills. That's where your tier 3 support is going to come in because they're going to need intensive intervention. And then 4, some students are going to require all 3 tiers to learn at high levels because everyone has access to tier 1 because it's your core instruction, it's your core curriculum, it's what everyone gets access to. Well, if you finish your unit, some of those kids haven't mastered those essential skills. And some of those kids who haven't mastered those essential skills are still missing foundational skills. So they're going to need some tier 2 support as well as tier 3 support. And so the system that you're going to build has to build that within it. There's no level of support of supplemental or intensive intervention that can compensate for what students miss at Tier 1. We cannot intervene our way out of ineffective core instruction. This is why Tier 1 is so important, because intervention cannot replace your core instruction. They can't receive intervention and miss the Tier 1. And so Shandy's going to take over, and she's going to go over Tier 1 with you.
All right. Hey guys, I'm Shandy Gordon. I'm the principal at Wonderview Elementary, and it's kind of halfway in between Russellville and Conway out in the country. So I'm at a rural school, and we are in cohort 3. So this is our second year going through the Solution Tree cohorts. So I'm going to talk to you guys about Tier 1, which is our core curriculum, what we guarantee that each student is going to get. Access to essential learning for all students. Next slide. And there's several things. This is kind of an outline of where I'm going to go talking about Tier 1. But the very first thing that you need to do is to identify your essential standards for each grade level or course. And there's been another webinar about how to pick your essential standards, but I'm going to kind of briefly touch on a few things there. Another thing is we have to get insanely, I love that they use that word, insanely clear about what students have to learn. And I'll talk a little bit more in depth about that in a second. And then after you've decided what you want, your standards to be and that kind of thing, you create unit plans to back up those standards, and then to check that kids have mastered those standards and those targets. You're going to use formative assessments, which informs your instruction. And then at the end of that, you'll have your summative, and then that's how the cycle works. Next slide. All right, so as far as picking essential standards go, there are 3 things that the experts tell you to look at for your essentials. Number 1, you're looking for endurance. So beyond today, beyond this test, is this a skill that the students are going to be able to use? So you're looking at the whole picture. Or if I'm picking this skill, is it something that is going to be expanded upon in the next grade and that kind of thing? Leverage, will you be able to use this skill in several different disciplines? Will you be able to use it in history and science and that kind of thing? And then to prepare for the next level, will it provide students with essential knowledge and skills essential for success in the next grade or level of instruction? So throughout this whole process, you're going to be looking at what the students coming to you need to know, and then possibly what students, what you need to send the kids on with as far as skills go. Next slide. All right, so I wanted to show you an example of what we've done here. So I know this seems like a really silly thing, but I taught in the regular classroom for 16 years, and I never sat down and put to paper, what do I want my students to come out with this year? What do I want them to know in my class this year? I mean, you have all these standards, they're kind of overwhelming. You kind of get in the rhythm of what you do every year, but what are you going to guarantee that kindergarten students are going to be able to know by the time they get out of your class? First grade, second grade, all the way up. What am I going to guarantee that first year band students know in my class? Okay. So what we did, we started, we kind of did things backwards, and we had to go back and do this. So that first block there, this is what we asked kindergarten teachers in literacy and math, and those are the 2 things that we focused on for now. In literacy, what are 5 things that you want students to know and be able to do by the time they get out of kindergarten. And same thing with math. Then what we did after that, because some of these things involve more than one standard, we went back in and added the standards underneath that, all the standards that go into letter knowledge mastery. So there's more than one standard that does that. So there's 5 things that we're guaranteeing, but there's more standards in that than just 5. So that's how we did it. Next slide, please. Now, this is what we're calling it a unit map. And guys, it doesn't matter what you use with your people as long as everybody's on the same page and everybody agrees that it's a good format to use, because there's going to be so many different templates and different things that people use. This is what is working for us currently. It's not 100% completed, but I wanted you to kind of see where we're working. And this was like a first draft of one. So this is a kindergarten, we call it, like I said, our unit maps, and this one just happens to be for reading. Now, what they did there, they put the essential standard up in the top corner. So they're working on 2 essential standards. Then you break those down into I can statements, which are, those are what the skills that kind of build into that whole standard. And those are written down there at the bottom. It says unwrapped standards, learning targets, I can statements. All right. So that's those 3 things that they have listed there. That is what you want your students to be able to do, to be able to get those full standards. All right. Now, there's a couple of other things on here. And like I said, this was kind of a first draft. You have enrichment standards, like ones that your kids don't have to have instruction, like reteach on, but something that's good for them to know. And then down here on the bottom right-hand corner, this is where we keep up with our assessments and what the kids did as far as learning these targets. And I'll show you that here. In, I don't have the hyperlink on here, but I copied it, and I'll show you that in just a second. Next slide. All right, so this is attached to that, that unit map. And this is just a calendar of real school days, right? So, you know, you have days where, you know, you're taking pictures or something that pushes it off. Make sure you plan for those. And these teachers decided with these couple of standards that they were teaching that they were going to need a certain amount of time, which is a unit. So the way that we're capturing what we're doing is we're putting it on a calendar. They hyperlink some of their resources. They put in vocab, that kind of stuff. And what I really want you to notice on here is these bolded things. Like on the 8th, they had a guided review and a quick check. So they've been working on, I can define characteristics of nonfiction text for 4 days. And then they do a quick check to make sure that their kids are getting it, okay? So that's the cycle. You plan for it in the unit, and then you are going to check for understanding here and there where you and your partners decide that that is appropriate to check. And that's where you are doing your formative assessments. It could be an exit ticket. It could be, I've seen a teacher use dry erase boards, and they're writing it on their notepad. You don't want to just not have, you know, a record of what your kids are doing. And they go through and this kid's got it. And then that way they know who's got that standard. It doesn't have to be a big drawn out test, it's a quick check. And so that is where they are deciding what kids are getting their core instruction. All right, here's the hyperlink. Go ahead and do the next slide. It was at the bottom that kind of had the results. So I want you to see this is what the kindergarten teachers had come up with. And again, guys, this process, we try something, some stuff works and we keep using it, or some stuff doesn't work and we change it. We mess up a lot, but the whole thing is to just do something and figure out what works for you. So what they did on this is my kindergarten teachers, they wrote all of their I can statements along the top, okay? Their students are listed here, and they're able just to put a quick green, I think they're filling it in with green. These kids got it. These kids got it, okay? Now, this part over on the right is something that we've started kind of messing with now at the end of our units. And the thing that I think is pretty cool about this is you put down who's got it and who doesn't, but that red box back there is called the primary barrier. And you've heard people talk about skill and will and all that kind of stuff. We want the teachers to put down what they think the kids' problem is. Like, are they not reading the directions? Did they read half the directions? Are they not paying attention? What is their primary barrier to not getting that skill? And then you can have an intervention on it. You can have some reteach on it. So I think that's a really cool piece that our coach has helped us out with, is defining what that primary barrier is for the kids not getting that skill. And that's where you come in with your partner and you sit down and you talk about results. You talk about what the kids, what your kids did and what your kids did. How did you teach that? How did I teach it? And then you go back and you reteach. So that is your tier 1. It is your core instruction. It is what you guarantee each kid is going to be able to have before they get out of your classroom. I think that is about all I've got. To me, this is the most, like, if you can get this piece, you decide what you want to teach and what you want the kids to have, and then you're able to cycle back and give them support. If you get this piece, you're going to improve your school so much. I mean, have you ever asked yourself, what do I want my kids to know by the time they leave my classroom, and get, insanely clear about what that is? You know, what does this standard mean? Break it apart and decide every little layer of what that means and make sure your kids can get there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Ms. Gordon. My name is Jason Seelig. I am the principal at Lake Hamilton Junior High School in the Lake Hamilton School District. This is my second year as the building principal here. And we just received the cohort 4 PLC project award last year, or excuse me, this year. This is our first year. So we're in our first year of that cohort. One thing I want to really make clear too, and we've kind of hinted on this, is that by no means are we doing everything perfectly, or we're there yet, or we've reached the mountaintop and, you know, there's nowhere else to go. We're continuously learning just as well as you are, alongside one another. And that's the purpose of these webinars, is to connect and network with people within the state. As Ms. Wally said, the state is doing a tremendous job of, you know, moving the state forward in this aspect. And so I'm going to talk about Tier 2 today. You heard Ms. Gordon talking about Tier 1. What ends up happening with Tier 1 is if the Tier 1 is not very good quality, you end up with a lot of kids in Tier 2 instruction. And that's not good, because then you can't make it targeted based on skill and will and based on the needs. So today I'm going to talk about teacher team actions, and I'm also going to talk about school-wide actions, which is that middle piece to that inverted pyramid that Ms. Wilson was discussing with you earlier. Next slide, please. And all the information that you're going to see come from me today, a lot of it's going to be some of the things we've experienced. Obviously, this is our year 1. Year 2 won't be till next year for our RTI year. And so we're kind of trying to get ahead of the game with by using the literature from Taking Action with Buffum and Mattis and Malone. So you're going to see a lot of the information come from that text and that resource. Okay, Tier 2 is the primary reason that RTI at Work pyramid was divided into 2 sections. There's teacher team responsibilities and school-wide team responsibilities. 2 reasons why kids struggle in your school. You guys can probably identify these kids right off the top of your head. The skill kids, interventions target students that have not mastered how to do specific academic skills on essential standards, and then the will kids, the kids that don't want to, that are asleep each day in class. They don't put forth any effort. So those are the 2 that we're going to focus on today. The guiding principle, though, for either group is to target the cause of the problem, not the symptom. And I think often we try to remedy the symptoms and not really attack the root and peel back the layers of what's going on with the kid, both academically and social and emotionally. Okay, next slide. Okay. I'm going to talk about 4 actions that teams need to focus on, essential actions. One of them is design and lead supplemental interventions for academic essential standards. Consider screening and immediate prerequisite skills. Monitor the progress of students receiving supplemental supports, and extend student learning. Next slide. Okay, we're going to talk about that first action, design and lead supplemental interventions for academic essential standards. These are based on learning targets to provide supplemental interventions within a unit based on a CFA or CSA. We talked about a unit plan. Our teams have started to develop and have developed essential standard unit plans that last approximately 3 weeks. We use Maria Nelson's 15-day learning assessment cycle to where we plug in intervention days throughout that unit, and plan for Tier 2 as well. And I'll kind of dive into that a little bit later. Excuse me. So what you do when you're designing and lead these supplemental interventions is, first, you got to identify concerns as a teacher team, data review of the assessment, and then determine the cause. And that's taking your formative assessments that you do daily, or your CFAs or your CSAs to determine the leading causes to drill down. Targeted desired outcomes. What do we want students to be able to do as a result of Tier 2 instruction? We have our Tier 1 instruction plan, but what are we going to do for those kids that we need to drill down to? And then how are we going to design intervention steps? Teams need to brainstorm intervention strategies based on teacher data. Then they need to determine how they're going to monitor that progress, what tool will we use, and I'll kind of dive into a data protocol a little bit later within the presentation. And then we have to assign lead responsibility. Who taught the skill the best based on data? And sometimes that becomes difficult if the culture is not set right in the building to be vulnerable for each other to say, you know, I didn't do well on that assessment. I don't know what the problem was, but the most important things that it allows us to do, it forces us to ask questions of what is the problem? Is it the assessment, delivery of instruction? Is it our curriculum? And so it forces us to ask all of those questions about the team's actions and then how to dive in and go from there. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the next action is screening and immediate prerequisite skills. And I'm sure you've seen Mike Mattis talk about this on his essential standards chart. I believe it's the third column from the left, but these are prerequisite skills and they're immediate. It's usually done unit by unit. It's not universal. It's not universal screening or anything like that. It's 2 weeks prior to a unit that maybe it's, vocabulary. Maybe it's front loading vocabulary, or it's, before each unit, what do kids need to know? What do we want to know? It's a pre-assessment basically. What do we want kids, or what do we want to tell us, the data to tell us of how we need to attack this from the minute day one we start application, the tier 1 application. And so again, it goes back to the tier 1 problem and not overloading our tier 2. So the best intervention is prevention. You have lower number of kids in tier 2. You can see the visual on the right-hand side of where that takes place. So you select and unwrap your essential standards and learning targets, and then you might set up a screening. And this is approximately 10 questions, maybe, not anything more than that. I like the quote down here: after 40 years of intensive research on school learning in the United States as well as abroad, my major conclusion by Benjamin Bloom is what any person in the world can learn, almost all persons can learn if provided with appropriate prior and current conditions of learning. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so the next step is monitoring the progress of students. We often talk about the intended, implemented curriculum, but the linchpin of a PLC, so to speak, is determining whether or not kids have learned the curriculum that we delivered. So we must progress monitor, and that's essential. The R is how we as a team respond. Teams must monitor how students respond to those interventions. And the timeline, again, is 2 to 3 weeks that kids should be fluent in and out of tier 2 instruction. Collaborative teams should take the following 3 steps when analyzing the results: discuss concerns about students and causes at the learning target level, decide which teacher will work with each group. You always want the best qualified, most qualified teacher in front of the kids teaching that specific skill. That's why you review that data to determine who taught the skill the best. And why. And then identify what tools or prompts will be used to monitor student progress. All right. The next slide is extending student learning. I got to tell you, even through this year, and I don't know about the ladies that went before me, but extensions are difficult to plan. And even talking to the solution tree consultants that are in our building, this is the toughest part to plan. But initially, you think it's quite simple. We'll just have kids go to, some enrichment programs and whatnot. But are we truly extending their learning? Are we doing it both vertically to some extent and then horizontally? Are we diving deeper into the standard and addressing some extension activities for kids? So one thing that's important is that RTI should never provide extra time and support to struggling students at the expense of our highest achieving students. And right now that sometimes happens because, we feel like the urgency of helping those kids that are underperforming, ultimately, which is kind of what we're geared towards through the byproduct of our ACT Aspire results. So there's still that focus on there, but we can't leave the extension group behind either. We need to focus on providing choice for extension if possible, providing students opportunities to pursue interest, giving them some choice, planning for students who need extension to use what they have learned and apply it to different situations or different ways to solve problems. This is held during flex time as well. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And it can be a culminating project or project-based learning. Okay. Okay. This is something I just wanted to share. I feel like it's important to everyone. It's teacher team actions. And this is something that we've come across this year and developed and are working through. Each team has this that they work through in their team meetings. This is part of their agenda. They must go to this to complete all of their work. And they have to upload their unit map, their SMART goals, the dates that they're given the CFA and CSA. Then they have spreadsheets for results. the team meeting date to review those using the data protocol. And then we plug in flex days for interventions. That's just an additional, you plan for that within the unit of study. That's besides the fact of offering flex time for intervention. So you can see that each team goes through that. It's an accountability tool as well, but it also houses all the information that teachers need to work on, especially as we start to come up on a summer to give meaning and purpose as we lead into next year. So if you have any questions about that, you can contact me and I'll be glad to dive into it. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're going to dive into some data. Now this is based off of Tier 1 instruction. And so this is conditionally formatted, of course, and it talks to other spreadsheets because once you, and especially as a secondary school, and I'm sure as an elementary school as well, it was very difficult to help teachers understand that in a secondary school, and I've got 7, periods a day, all of those students, how am I going to keep up with their data? And so on the left-hand side, you'll see that we've populated their kids by period. They go in and enter their scores for each CFA or CSA. And that's kind of one thing that I was tight about, or that we were tight about, was that we've got to start with 1 CFA and 1 CSA within a unit. There must be that in a unit because I don't want them overdoing entering their data because it's a daunting task, as you can tell. This was challenging. But as we start to look at the data, they really start to dive into determining what is the plan for Tier 2? How are we going to help these kids? It starts to put forth that effort and that urgency to do something about it. So next slide, please. So that was an individual teacher spreadsheet. This is the protocol that the team uses. And I discussed earlier that this is the linchpin of a PLC. We had to get to this point to start really taking action in what we were doing. And so we have the common assessment protocol that we use, that when they have their data team meetings, the teams will go through their protocol. They'll ask questions and answer those questions, and then they'll have to actually, this sheet talks to the last sheet. So depending on where they are, where they fail, the students on achievement levels, you can see there are the 3 columns: students who need additional time and support, and they'll have a list of kids, and then the mastered, the 2.0 skills, and students who need extension. And then to the right, excuse me, they're to come up with an instructional plan for each one of those columns, how they're going to address the students who need additional time and support, how they're going to address the kids that got it and reach proficiency, and then how are we going to extend. And we're not there yet. So just because it's in place, we're still working on it. Again, we're in year 1. We're trying to put some systems in place to just help us as we move forward to fill in those gaps. The tabs down below, you can see that what it'll dive into is the 8th grade. You can start to see the entire grade breakdown of if they're reaching their SMART goals. Is it a particular issue going on within the 8th grade team that they need to address? And then we drill down per teacher to address those issues by teacher and help and support that teacher to plug in supports for them to come and see a teacher teach or do instructional rounds based off of that data. So any questions about that, feel free to ask and I'll happily answer. Next slide. All right, so one of the things that's important and is still something we're working on as well is creating a master schedule now for next year and looking at universal screeners to determine how we want to design our master schedule. And that's taking place right now. But this allows access to the students for Tier 1 and Tier 2, and this requires a school-wide effort. It's not left up to the individual teachers. These are now school-wide essential actions that we're discussing. And so the primary responsibility falls on the school leadership team. Some things to consider for criteria is the frequency. Now we have carved out 45 minutes daily that we've pulled from other class periods to have that Tier 2 time. But it says here that, twice per week at least. Duration is 30 minutes, available to all students during the school day, and not a time to introduce new curriculum. I think we've pretty been well versed on that. This is not a time where new curriculum should be introduced to kids, because we're not able to provide that for the kids if we're pulling them out for the tier 2. Next slide, please. All right, the next one is developing a process for identifying students who need help. You know, I've mentioned universal screening. I know we use ACT Aspire right now, as well as NWA scores, common assessments from teacher teams, and then staff recommendations, especially for the behavioral side of the interventions. All right, next slide. Planning and implementing supplemental interventions for essential social and academic behaviors. This is something that we've got to get better. These are your will kids. You know, social behaviors that we want to tackle as an intervention team or as a leadership team. We all see these kids in the classrooms when we're walking in those classrooms. And we see the academic behaviors that they're lacking in. And so we need to find a way to intervene in that area as well. And this a lot of times becomes your site intervention team that you develop to tackle some of these problems. Because again, it's not something that the individual teacher should be responsible for handling. All right. All right, some of the things that schools face are the logistics. When will we provide tier 2 interventions? Who will provide the interventions? What if students have multiple academic areas to address? How do we hold students accountable? And something that we use, and actually we're piloting it now, we took a shift the last 9 weeks of school this year. We're using a software that actually tracks and assigns students to interventions and extensions. And it does so through a notification system through email, where kids check their email on Mondays each week, and it tells them where they're going on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of each week. And those days are priority days right now because we're piloting this for math, science, and English. And so we have priority days, and once those kids have been selected for their priority day, the other kids are allowed now to be selected by all other staff members within the building. Next year, what we'll end up doing is providing students that choice. They'll be able to self-select. If they're not being required to go to intervention, notice I said required. If they're not being required to go to intervention, then they'll have the opportunity to self-select an extension that they'll be able to go to. So that's been huge for us. It has streamlined it big time for us here, especially at the junior high level, where you do have a lot of moving parts, and that wolf time or that flex time can be challenging to hold students accountable. You know, are kids where they're supposed to go? It tracks attendance, takes attendance. And so it really helps us out in being able to understand what's going on with the particular kid. It also has grade checks, because we're going to begin advisory next year, 1 day a week, to check on kids and their grades and whatnot, and see how we can pull kids for the will interventions as well. All right, I think that's it. That is it for me. Now we're going to move on to tier 3, intensive support. Ms. Wilson.
Okay, so you've got to hear about tier 1, which is your core instruction, and then you just heard about tier 2, which is mainly for your teacher teams to take the lead on that. And so now we have tier 3. These are our students who need the most intensive support. So how do we do that? What does that look like? So one of the first things that you're going to need to do is you're going to have a process for identifying students needing that intensive support. So one of the things that we have created is called a universal screening planning guide. And I'm going to show you an example. I am a K2 school. Hold on just a second, make sure it comes up. So this is my 2nd grade universal screening planning guide. And so this is taken from Taking Action. There is a template in there of this, but I could share this with you as well if you would like to see them. But we do have a virtual academy. So I have in 2nd grade, I have 41 students who are virtual students. And so we also added this. This was new for us this year. We also have reading, writing, number sense, ELL, social and academic behaviors, health, and home. These are all areas that could say a student needs that intensive support. So what we did is we took our collaborative team. So our second grade team sat down and they said, okay, for our kids in the virtual academy, why would we recommend them? What would cause us to recommend them to our site intervention team that they need intensive support? And they wrote the at-risk criteria. So for example, they're not showing up to Zoom meetings, they're not turning in any assignments, and they're not coming for testing each month. Or they're not being consistently engaged in the virtual lesson. So if these things are happening, and how do we know? Because it's observation during the lesson, it's attendance intact. We're looking at that daily. And then the engagement we were looking at every 2 to 3 weeks. And that was our virtual teachers are in charge of that. So they're looking at that. If our virtual teachers see any of these at-risk criteria happening, they fill out a recommendation form, which I'll show you. And that student's name goes to the team so that we can help them out because they've done everything they know how to do. They've met with their team, their grade level team, and they are out of options. Like they don't know what else to do. And so that's what our tier 3 team is for. Then we looked at reading. And so they put in the characteristics, what foundational skills are missing and what assessment are we using to show that those foundational skills are missing. So you can see we're using DSA and DIBELS, and we're looking at beginning and middle of the year, and the classroom teachers are the ones that are doing that. And they put in exactly what the criteria are. So if they're scoring this on the DSA, if they're scoring this on the DIBELS, then this is criteria that they would use to recommend that student to our site intervention team. And so then they did that for writing, number sense, ELL, our academic and social behaviors, because they're just as important as our academics here. And then health and home, because there are things like attendance that could cause issues just as much as if they can't decode CVC words. So they put all these things in here. So every grade level created this universal screening planning guide. So this kind of universal screening does not rely on a series of tests, but instead on data and knowledge we have already accumulated relating to our students who are most in need of support. So it's not about just one magic screener that tells the be all and end all of, is this child in need of intensive support? There's a bunch of things that can go into it. You need to use the knowledge that your teachers have and get their recommendations for who needs that intensive support. But there does need to be a guide for that. So there's got to be a reason why. So every grade level has created this guide so that they are all on the same page of which students would need that intensive support. Go back here. So once you have your universal screening planning guide done, now your teams can start recommending students to your site intervention team. But that means you need to actually create a site intervention team. So this intervention team's purpose is to focus on individual student needs. So like when Mike Matos was talking about the inverted pyramid, how it goes from all students to some students to that student, that's what this tier 3 site intervention team is about. It's looking at that student to figure out what does that one student need in order to be successful. And so here is an example list of people that could be on your team. We took this example list and we applied it to the people that we actually have available in our school district or in my school. So on my team, and this was our first year of actually having a site intervention team. Once we learned about RTI last year, we talked about a plan. We actually implemented it this year. So on my team, it's me. I lead the team. My assistant principal is on that team. My behavior interventionist is on that team. Our counselor, I have 2 instructional facilitators that are on the team. Our reading interventionist is on the team. She's the one that does a lot of our dyslexia services. I have my speech pathologist on the team, and she also has a dual role of being our due process in our building as well. I have a special ed teacher on the team. Our after school director is also on the team because she has multiple areas of specialty because she has a background in academics as well as in behavior. So she can serve multiple roles there. We do have an ELL person that we bring in when we need it. She is not on the team every time, but if we have a student that we're going to need help with that, we'll let her know when we're going to meet, and she'll meet when as needed, but she's not on the team every time we meet. So looking at who's in your school, who you have available, you do have to have a team that can go school-wide and look at all the resources that your school has in order to meet each individual kid's needs. And so once you have put that team together, then you have to decide how often are you going to meet, and you got to create team norms. So we meet every 3 to 4 weeks. We try to make it closer to 3 weeks. Sometimes it's 4 weeks because, you know, school life. And so the goal is every 3 weeks, but there have been a few times it's been every 4 weeks. And then we talk about the students that have been recommended, and we create a plan for them. So the first time we met, we talked about what our purpose is, why we're meeting as this team. We set our calendar for when we were going to meet. And then we talked about our norms. And the norms for this team are just as important as the norms for every other team. And so our team set our norms as that our decision-making was going to stay as a team. So I may be the principal, but I can't overrule a decision that that team has made. We make it as a team. If I'm not there and they make a decision I don't agree, we meet together again and we make that decision as a team. So there's not one person overruling decisions made as that team. We are going to come prepared. So we have documentation that we keep, and each person on that team has to come prepared to share about the student that they're in charge of. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. We're going to have equal share time during our meeting so that one person is not controlling the meeting. We're listening to everyone's ideas. We're going to stay positive about our students and our staff. We're going to presume positive intentions. No matter what is said or what is done, we're going to presume positive intentions because everyone is here in the best interest of that student. So we've got to stay positive about that. We're going to stay focused. We're going to be solution oriented. And one of the things that was important for us is that there are no excuses. It doesn't matter what's going on at home for that kid. If they have, they come from a poverty background, none of that matters. We're not going to make excuses for our kids. We're going to look at what we can control at school, and we're going to make a plan for those things. And then we all agreed we're going to be advocate for our kids. Like, that's the whole purpose of this team, is you're advocating for these kids to get them what they need because they are in need of some remediation. So once you have your planning guide, your screening guides, which students are going to be recommended, then you have your team to be recommended to. Now you've got to start looking at how are you going to prioritize those resources. So your team's job is to utilize the best resources available and think outside the box to prioritize what we have on hand. So I'm going to show you a little clip from one of my favorite movies, Apollo 13, about why this is important.
A situation brewing with the carbon dioxide.
We had a CO2 filter problem on the LIM module.
5 filters on the LIM.
Which were meant for 2 guys for a day and a half. So I told the doctor.
They're already up to 8 on the gauges. Anything over 15. Impaired judgment, blackouts, the beginnings of brain asphyxia.
What about the scrubbers on the command module?
They take square cartridges.
The ones on the LIM are round.
Tell me this isn't a government operation.
This just isn't a contingency we remotely looked at.
Those CO2 levels are going to be getting toxic.
Well, I suggest you gentlemen invent a way to put a square peg in a round hole. Rapidly.
Okay, people, listen up. There's handed us this one. We got to come through. We got to find a way to make this fit into the hole for this, using nothing but that. Let's get it organized.
Okay, let's build a filter.
Better get some coffee going too, someone.
So your site intervention team is basically going to be the engineers that were at that table. Everything they had on that table is the resources you have at school. And a lot of times you are trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. But that is the job of that side intervention team, is to look at what you have available, have that positive mindset, be creative with what you have, and find a way to fit that square peg into that round hole. So what is that going to look like? So how does this all work? You're like, okay, that sounds great, but how does it really work? So the first step is that the teachers recommend. So how do the teachers recommend? We have a recommendation form that the teachers fill out and that we keep up with as well as we meet with them. So, and I can share this. This is, you should be able to click on this once this presentation is posted, because this is a blank one that I've made just for this presentation. So it just has some basic information that we need about the kid. It has the links to the universal screening guides that I showed you earlier in there for kindergarten, first and second grade. And this box right here is really important. The reason the teacher is recommending. So using the at-risk criteria, be specific about that student. What made you recommend that student to us? Then there's a tab for data depending on what grade level you are. And it's specific. So like the kindergarten tab has the DIBELS information for kindergarten. It has a place for DSA, and we take iStation in our school. So then it has a place for reading and math iStation scores. And it has that for every grade level. So it doesn't matter what grade you are, you just fill out the appropriate one. So we keep track of your academics as well as we do. There's a social and emotional tab. So you tell us about the student. What are their strengths and what are their passions? What are their interests? That's just as important as what they're struggling with. Did they already have a behavior support plan? If they did, we ask them to link it there. Do you believe the academic skills, including task completion, are impacting the problem behavior? You put yes or no. Do they receive outside counseling? So we work with 3 different counseling agencies that come into our school. And so we need to know, does that student receive the outside counseling as well? And then if behavior is one of the reasons that you're recommending them, we need to know what behaviors it has been having, or we can't help you. We also have a physical development one where we talk about speech. Our speech pathologist has given us a screening reference guide so that the teacher can do a quick screening and give us more information. So based on that screening, they type in here sounds or basic language concepts those children are struggling with. So we have that. So are you requesting referral for speech? Does that kid already receive speech? Like things we need to know. Do they have PT and OT, or are you asking for a referral for that? And then health and home. We talk about attendance. Do you know if a FINS has been filed? Have they passed their hearing and vision? Do they take medication? Do they have any medical conditions? Are there any family or social stressors at home that you know about that could be a barrier or something that's causing part of the issue? So the teacher has to fill out all of these tabs. And then since I'm the one that's leading that team, they share this document with me. Now, once they share this document with me, let me go back here, they're entered onto a master list. And so here is, I took the student names off of the master list, but this is actually the master list that we've been using all year, just without our student names on it. So right here, there will be a student name, and that name would be linked to that document that I just showed you. And then it tells us who the teacher, what grade that child is in, who's that child's classroom teacher. And then here are the dates that we have met so far this year. And then if there's a date under and in there, that means we actually talked about that child. So like this first child, number 1, wasn't referred until December to us. So the first 2 boxes are blank, are grayed out because we didn't have that child referred until December. And so you can see some of these children were referred in October. Some haven't been referred until April. But then it helps us keep track of every date we've talked about this kid, to talk about their plan, their progress, and how they're doing. This here where it says person responsible, these are the team members of the site intervention team. And what we've done is we have divided these students out between all of us, and we check in with that teacher before we meet to get an update on how the interventions that we've planned out are going. So if someone else was also, besides the classroom teachers, in charge of helping, we connect with all those people associated with this one student, and we get that information we need, and that person brings it to the site intervention team every time we meet, so that we have up-to-date information about the child and how the interventions that we planned are actually working. So teachers recommend, they get entered on the master list. Then we meet and we talk about the ProSolve process. So here's an actual example of one of our students. So I took names off, so there's no names here. But here's the reason that the student was recommended. The teacher filled out all the data for us so we would know exactly where that child is, what they were struggling with data-wise, that kind of thing. And then what we do is we go to the ProSolve process. So the ProSolve process is one of the things that has been very helpful for us. You can find this in Taking Action. So we've taken the template from Taking Action and we've just made it electronic in Google. So what you see here is, over here you have essential standards, immediate prerequisite skills, ELL, academic behavior, social behavior, health and home. Which of these are the reason that that person or that student was recommended? And we put those concerns here. So this student was recommended for, they were missing immediate prerequisite skills. So she said it was lacking significant decoding skills. She had delay in letter and letter sounds, and she's having trouble blending letters into words. So we talked about what could be causes of the concern, and then what do we want, what's the goal? So we have this team, we're meeting, what do we want this student to be able to do? We wanted her to be able to decode 1 and 2 syllable words consistently. And so how are we going to get there? So here are the intervention steps that we're taking to make that happen. We use Apple Group Connections for our phonics and for our interventions. And so we gave her a level 1 screener to help us determine which specific skills she were missing. Who's responsible for that? That's Miss Plunkett. She's our interventionist. And so November 11th, the first time we met, so we just said start process because we were going to give her the screener. Then in December, when we met again, we talked about, well, what did the screener tell us? What was, after we gave the screener, what do we do with it? She's getting interventions from Miss Plunkett now. And then every time we meet after that, we see how far is she moving on those interventions. Is it working? Is it not? Now, another thing that we saw was that she had academic behaviors, because this was a virtual student. She relied on her mom a lot during the Zoom lesson. She would keep looking at her mom to see if she was answering those questions right or not, or if she's doing what she's supposed to. The cause of that concern, when she doesn't know how to do something, she gets really frustrated, so she wants to check with someone. So our outcome was we want her to be able to have strategies to deal with her frustration. So we set her up with our counselor to do a weekly Zoom where she can work with Miss Thomas on building her confidence. And so you can see this is how we keep track of everything that we're doing, and is it working or is it not? And then every time we meet, we just added another column to that. So that is our process for tier 3. And we have, and just total flat out honesty, this is the first year we've done it like this, but we have seen a real growth in how the kids that have been recommended to our team have real growth they've made, because we're focusing on a small number of students who need those intensive intervention, and we're being very specific per student about what intervention they need, who's going to give it to them. Because it's a school-wide team, we can look at all the resources we have available and find the best resource for that student. So if you email me, and you're going to get our emails last, I can share any templates that you've seen with you, so that if you want to use any of them, please feel free to do so. And so one of the last things I want to share with you is some of the books that we've used as really amazing resources. So the first one is Learning by Doing. And if you don't have this book yet, you really need to get it. This gives you a great overview of RTI in it. But then the book you really need with that is the Taking Action book. This book, you can see mine is, I got notes, sticky notes everywhere. And it's like, we have been working a lot out of this book. But what I love about Taking Action is that it breaks it down into simple steps and actions to take in order to implement this. And so it helps you like a step-by-step process on how to put this RTI at Work process to work in your school. And if you're struggling with something in particular, you can go to that section, look at those actions, and it tells you the why and the how. It gives you templates, because all the templates that you saw today, we got from this book. We just turned them electronic so that we can use them. Another book that I've really loved is this Big Book of Tools. It has tools for everything, PLC and RTI at Work. So it just gives you some alternate things to use. And then this one, Uniting Academic and Behavior Interventions, because they go hand in hand. You know that your behavior impacts your academics and your academics impacts your behavior. So it's a very short book, but it has some great options in there and resources for you to use. And then these are one of the newer books that have come out, but best practices. I just have we have the tier 3 version here. We're working on getting tier 1 and tier 2, but they come in an elementary version and a secondary version. So you can get best practices at tier 1, at tier 2, and tier 3, and all 3 come in elementary and secondary versions. And, you know, obviously I have the elementary version since that's where we are at. But this also gives you great resources if you're struggling with something in particular in order to, because the answer's in the room, as my PLC coach tells me all the time. And I'm like, sometimes I feel like I'm in the right room. And she's like, nope, you've got to bring other people into your room and the answers are in their room. So these are the other people sometimes we bring into our room. We go looking for the answers that we can't find. But these are the resources that we use a lot in our school. So these are definitely worth the money that you have. And just, you know, a little shout out, you can definitely purchase them with your ESSER funds, because this is going to help move your PLC at Work process forward. And so this is the time, you know, thinking outside the box and how you're going to use your money. These books would really help with that. And doing some book studies, I think, would really help with that if you're struggling with something in particular or you haven't even begun yet. So because it doesn't matter where you are, you just got to get started. That was one of the hardest things to know. You can't just keep talking about it. You've got to just jump in and get started. Sorry, computer decided not. I'm gonna skip that one. All right, so here is our contact information for all 3 of us and for Missy as well. So if you need something or we can help you with anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, all 3 of us. I'm pretty sure I could say for all 3 of us, we'd be more than happy to answer any questions. We obviously don't have all the answers and we are still figuring things out, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be that way forever. So
absolutely, continuous learning. Thank y'all so very much. There are some questions that I want us to get to that are in the chat. So let's kind of talk about those. Before we move on though, I do want to say, Janet, if you'll take it back to that screen with the books, your resources. So Mike Mattis, who's one of the authors on Learning by Doing, Taking Action, Best Practice. Is he on United Academic and Behavior? I can't see that one.
Yes, he is.
Yes, he's on that one. So he is presenting on June 24th at the ADE Summit. So if you plan on coming to the summit in Hot Springs at the Convention Center, or I think they're offering a hybrid model, that registration will open up on Friday, and Mike Mattis is presenting on June 24th. But then if you look at the Big Book of Tools with Bill Ferriter, he is presenting on June 22nd at the ADE Summit at the Hot Springs Convention Center. So both of those authors. I wanted you to know that you have the opportunity to listen to them. And I think we have some educators on here who are presenting too at the ADE Summit. So thank y'all. Y'all want to come listen to them, they will be there as well. So thank you for that. And I did put in the chat that on April the 28th, Mike Mattis will be presenting virtually and it is free. So on Tier 1 interventions, and then he's presenting on May 13th for Tier 2 and May 19th for Tier 3. You may register for those at the ESC Works link, and we will get you the Zoom link for that. And then I wanted to share one school district's numbers, because as you're going through this RTI process, some of the evidence, which we're constantly collecting evidence to see, best practices if it's working. And one of the schools that presented their evidence, their ELL population, their English language learners, went from dismissing 3 in 1 year to dismissing 14 a couple years later. That's a huge number when they're dismissing that many from the ELL, because when you're looking at it kid by kid, skill by skill, those opportunities present itself. And then also that same school reported that their numbers they had, before they went into this process of RTI, they had 23 referrals in 1 year for special ed. 2 years later, their referrals went down to 10. And that's because when you start looking again at that kid by kid, skill by skill, some of those missing links can be filled in with just intervention. So great presentation, and thank you so much. Blavel, what curriculum do you use for reading and math is one of the questions.
Well, we use a variety of things, like there's not just one, but for phonics, we do Apple Group Connections out of Jonesboro, and we use Hegarty's for phonemic awareness. And then like for everything else, it's just kind of different things we've pulled together. And in math, it's the same way. We don't have a textbook or anything that we use.
Good deal. We will be sharing the intervention sheet. Someone asked for you to share the intervention sheet, but I'll also upload this PowerPoint to the PLC page on the DESE website. So hopefully those links will still be in there, but there is an email in there if you want to share those. A couple emails for blank copies of the template. Here's another one. So I think the rest of them are all blank copies of the template that they would like shared. Any other questions? Because like I said, we're going to stay on for a little bit, for just a moment, and answer those questions. But thank y'all so much. I'm trying to see. Can you go back to the email page? Jana, will you move it back to the email page so everybody will have?
Yep.
Again, as you're moving through this process too, we have several of these webinars up wherever you are in that journey, so that you can access these webinars and hear from other Arkansas administrators. But also there is an event page, a PLC event, where we offer several of the free trainings from Solution Tree Associates there's a link on there where you can look at those, what's coming up and being offered, such as Mike Mattis. And I'm trying to even think what else is coming up. We've got proficiency scales coming up fairly soon. Someone else, can you share the intervention templates? All right, so if y'all will stay on, presenters, if you will stay on just a few minutes, and everyone else have a great afternoon. And if you have questions, just stick around for a few minutes and you can ask those questions.
Jana, I'm going to have to get that template from you also.
I can share it with you.